Hello, Mr. Montalvo here, U.S. History, and today is Unit 4, Lesson 2, Day 2, taking a look at race relations um, during World War One and immediately following World War One. So our objective for today is to examine examples of World War One and post-war race relations, such as the East St. Louis riots, the Silent March, which was a reading assigned to the lesson before this, and the Tulsa riots. Now, try to think back to the previous lesson and describe the shifts in the role of women in societal, cultural, and political life that took place in the 1920s. And remember that as a result of the 19th Amendment, we see a lot of shifts in society and women taking on different roles, both in the workplace but also in society and in politics. Now, the East St. Louis race riots of 1917, July 2nd to be exact, was a bloody outbreak of violence, stemming specifically from the employment of Black workers in a factory holding government contracts. It was the worst of many incidents of racial antagonism in the U.S. During World War I that were directed toward African Americans newly employed in war industries. Whites turned on blacks, stabbing, clubbing, and hanging them, and driving about 6,000 from their homes. 40 blacks and about 8 whites were killed when everything was said and done. Now, on July 28th, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, staged the Silent Parade down Fifth Avenue in New York City, protesting the riots and other acts of violence. As a result, President Woodrow Wilson publicly denounced mob violence and lynching, of which there had been 54 in 1916 and 38 in 1917. Lynchings, that is. And those are the only ones that were reported. Following World War I, Tulsa, Oklahoma, boosted one of the most affluent African American communities, referred to as the Black Wall Street. One morning, or rather on the morning of May 30th, 1921, a young man named Dick Rowland was riding in an elevator in the Drexel building at 3rd and Main, the heart of the community in Tulsa, with a woman named Sarah Page. Now, Tulsa police arrested Rowland the following day and began investigation. An inflammatory report in the Tulsa Tribune spurred a confrontation between armed mobs and around the courthouse, where the sheriff barricaded the top floor to protect Rowland. Now, shots were fired, and the outnumbered blacks began retreating to Greenwood Avenue to the business district. In the early morning hours of June 1st, 1921, Tulsa was looted and burned by white rioters. Governor Robertson declared martial law, and as a result, the National Guard troops were set in and arrived. Guardsmen assisted in putting out fires, took imprisoned African Americans out of the hands of vigilantes, and imprisoned all African American Tulsans not already interned. Over 6,000 people were held, some for as long as 8 days. In the wake of the violence, 35 city blocks lay charred in ruins. Over 800 people were treated for injuries. And contemporary reports, those are reports later in history or more recently, confirm the death toll beginning with at least 36. Those were not reported initially. In 2001, the Tulsa Race Riot Commission released a report indicating that historians now believe that there were over 300 people that died as a result of these riots. Now, there is a very interesting TED Talk that covers the Great Migration. The Great Migration being the result of Jim Crow segregation African Americans in large amounts leaving the South, both to the north and to the west, for economic opportunities and for political or to escape the segregation and the mistreatment. So I'm going to link that below, and then in addition to that, this very insightful graphic organizer that breaks it apart. Now you might have to watch this TED Talk more than once in order to understand this completely. In addition to the TED Talk, in addition to the TED Talk, there is an additional reading taking a look at various primary source documents, particularly a series of photographs that will help lead us into the conversation that will be taking place in the next lesson. So please do check that out. It'll be linked below. And then just as our exit ticket for today, it directly connects with our objective. Try to explain the examples of World War I and post-war race relations as the ones that we've listed. Try to explain maybe some of the underlying reasons for those negative race relations, some of the possible outcomes, and then try to make some connections to today. That's it for today's lesson. Take care. I hope to see you soon.